Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Olga Tumanova, and Ukraine Media Center Current Form continues its operation. It's been 9 years of the war, and today's day 379 of the full-scale invasion of Russian aggressor of our homeland. And I want to thank the representatives of all the mass media who help us to tell the world the truth about this war. Now we will be talking about Mariupol. Joining us in this studio is Vadym Boichenko, the mayor of Mariupol. Good afternoon, Mr. Vadym. Good afternoon. I cannot help but start a conversation with what's going on in Mariupol lately. We've seen the reports about something that all of the Ukrainians call the cotton, the explosions. We were watching it with bated breath about all those explosions in Mariupol. So we were thinking, is it true that something significant is going on there? So can you give us a little bit more detail on that? Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank the armed forces of Ukraine who give us this opportunity to discuss what we can discuss. We can discuss the explosions that destroy, that created the distortion of the vision of aggressor, their illusion that they are in the middle of their rear, in the safe. So our armed forces, they launched a number of missiles, first in the port where they destroyed Russian material, as well as a couple of storages with munitions in Mariupol, which were destroyed by our armed forces. So we've seen some movement. Russian forces withdrew a little bit from Mariupol because they were not expecting that. Why is it happening? Because our army is preparing to counteroffensive. They destroyed the silos with munitions. We see the terrorists who assault other cities now. They complain that they run out of weapons. They cannot keep the pace to maintain the pace of fire to advance, because our forces destroyed all those silos, the storages, which may provide the advance of the Russian offensive. So now we create the prerequisites for our counteroffensive, because what Russians were doing in Mariupol, we stopped their work, what they called the repair of the repairing of the city, reconstruction of the city. We see that those reconstruction works stopped. Why they stopped? Because they understand that shortly something is about to happen, and this is what Ukrainian army is preparing to. Do we feel the presence of guerrilla movement in Mariupol? Well, yeah, it emerged in March thanks to the Ukrainians in Mariupol. They provide us with necessary information, which helps us create what is called explosions in Mariupol, the cotton in Mariupol. When Russian vehicles move over Mariupol, we know that they're moving, they're concentrating their forces somewhere, that our guys and girls also, they provide us with this information. When their troops are moving, they are switching internet and cellular networks off, which complicates the works of our citizens, of our Ukrainians who provide us with that information, but they keep doing it, risking their lives. They keep giving us information, and they helps us create the prerequisites for those explosions. Well, you communicate with a lot of citizens, denizens of Mariupol there. Do we know about the concentration of occupiers' forces there, or are they dispersing? What are the logistics routes they're traditionally using? Well, after those explosions in Mariupol, it's clear that they are regrouping, and they moved their training facilities outside of the city because the city became dangerous. They were thinking they're in the rear, but now it's the front line there. The number of the civilians reduced in the city. The Russians were trying to build something. Were trying to show a picture that Russia liberated the city for their internal propaganda, for their internal consumption, and now they suspended all their movements, I mean in terms of repairs and reconstruction. So the situation is quite complicated in the city. 2 days ago we met a woman who just left Mariupol. She made her way out of Mariupol was very difficult because it was going through Russia, Baltic countries, then Poland, and back to Ukraine. And this way took her 3 weeks. It was quite difficult, and on their way they encountered some problems. Well, what problems? Are the problems of screening. The screening is in place, it didn't go anywhere. Every denizen of Mariupol, they are considered as the members of Azov brigade by the Russian authorities. So they make sure no one goes out of Mariupol, out of those who shouldn't go out. If you wanna join some wars like clearing the debris in cooperation with terrorist state to conceal their war crimes, you have to swear allegiance to the terrorist state. So they switch the cameras on and they ask you, so what happened in Mariupol? Who did it? And people under pressure, they have to say that it was not Russia who did it, but it was done by some nationalist forces of Ukraine. They do it under pressure, and if God forbid you want to get that red paper, you have to say it again. So this is how they press as a terrorist state, how they press on the people, but people understand everything. Why I'm saying this, I want to remind everybody that what scale of tragedy was happening in Mariupol a year ago, on the 9th of March last year, when the Russian aircraft entered the airspace above Mariupol and dropped 2 bombs over the dramatic theater, with a lot of people who died there. So when we say that Russia is a terrorist state, it is a terrorist state. The local population of there, they understand what happened there, but they keep spreading lies. They were spreading their military propaganda from the very beginning, that it was not a Russian military plane, that was a British airplane that came from Britain and destroyed the city of Mariupol in cooperation with the Ukrainian nationalists. I want to remind everybody what happened to Mariupol after the actions, after the offensive of the terrorist state. They destroyed 1,800 buildings in Mariupol. They identified 934 buildings as those to be removed, because they want to conceal their war crimes, because they understand that we're moving towards our return, our counteroffensive. They're preparing to this counteroffensive. They try to clear the traces of their war crimes. We have to realize that 50% of the city just does not exist for the time being. They already removed about 1,400 such buildings. They already concealed the traces of their war crimes. Well, getting back to the topic of the forced passportization, do we know the scale of this phenomena? How many people were forced to receive Russian passports? Well, today it's snowballing already. It's thousands of people who have to receive those red colored paper under pressure. Why? Because say an elderly woman residing in Mariupol does not receive a humanitarian aid, does not receive pension in case they don't receive Russian passport. In the same way, if you want to survive in Mariupol, from where you cannot flee without screening, if you want to get a job, you have to swear allegiance to the criminal authority of Russian Federation in front of the camera. You have to say what happened in Mariupol, like you are forced to lie because you have no choice. They do it in a forced measure. They torture Ukrainians, they torture Mariupol, and this phenomena is snowballing. Well, as to the humanitarian component, what is the situation over there? Do we know a number of people who remain there? Well, on a monthly basis, we track through billing the number of people who are residents of Mariupol. We understand how many of them are still in Mariupol, how many are spread across Ukraine, or how many left abroad. So our estimate is 120,000 in Mariupol, 150,000 in Ukraine, and about 120,000 more abroad, including Russia, Europe, and other countries of the world. So this is the situation as of now. From the point of view of humanitarian component, it's complicated there. As you've just heard, Russia tries to demonstrate that they have intention of doing something. They brought some windows for repairing of the buildings, but they're different size. They just don't fit. They try to still fit it in, but those windows doesn't fit and it looks terrible. But this is what they show for their propaganda picture for internal consumer, that they keep doing something. They pulled a lot of construction workers from all over Russia. Well, we see that those works are now suspended due to the explosions, but as to the critical infrastructure, for example, it does not operate, it does not function. There is no normal quality water because the water is being taken from the reservoir. Its reserve is for 100 for half a year for 500,000 citizens, but the quality of that water is terrible, and it's a huge problem in view of the fact that we're approaching spring and then summer. And going further, the Russians did not provide normal power supply. They were not prepared for heating season. They replaced the radiators in the buildings, but there is no hot water and there is no heat. So this is how it happens. They torture people. The people live in very difficult conditions. Under forced passportization, the prices in the pharmacies are 5 times higher than in Ukraine. There are no healthcare facilities. So these are all the indicators of a humanitarian catastrophe. Well, we were talking to Mayor of Melitopol recently and talking about the balance of the population over there. He mentioned that there are more Russians now than Ukrainians in Melitopol. Well, do you observe the same situation in Mariupol? Yes, I think it's 50-50. The Russians keep coming from the depressive corners of Russian Federation, and our locals, they try to communicate with them. They ask, why did you come? And they say they came there to make money, just for the sake of money, from different corners of Russian Federation. This is how the things really are. Dear colleagues, your questions from the floor. Well, once again, your team, apart from taking care of denizens of Mariupol who live abroad and inside Ukraine and documenting war crimes in Mariupol, also your team works on the face of future Mariupol. You have projects. What's your vision of the future of Mariupol? What are those projects? And if I may ask, can you tell us a few words about your team who supports you? Well, my team is quite small. There was 1,300 of us before the war. It was, before the full-scale invasion. Yes, now it's only 48 people, plus me, 49th. So only the best ones remain, those who keep Ukraine and Ukrainian Mariupol in their hearts. And my team, we've made the impossible. I want to emphasize that last year we were taking care of everything that was related to rescue of our Mariupol residents. We were trying to pull them out of the claws of the terrorist state who blocked Mariupol and Putin was not letting people out until the 13th of March. We were trying to pull them out, but Russia was deporting people to Russia in a forced manner. And in April we started supporting the citizens of Mariupol. We opened a number of centers. Every 10 days we were opening another center of support for the residents of Mariupol, and this powerful network supported the residents of Mariupol for all this time. So just imagine, they received 360,000 packages of humanitarian aid. We were supporting them. Those are the thousands of tons of food, medicines, hygienics, and the main thing is when the residents of Mariupol, they were leaving, they were feeling that they could come to the center of support and to receive all the necessary help. And thanks to our international partners who were supporting us back in 2022, and they keep supporting us, raising a lot of investments. 590 million hryvnias were raised for the support of Mariupol, the network of support centers. So we had this sociological questioning. We asked the residents of Mariupol whether they want to get involved in this important work for the reconstruction of future Mariupol, and they said yes, we want. So there is a discussion going on in those support centers. We discuss with the residents of Mariupol how they see the future of Mariupol. We will rebuild it as it is in our hearts, which aches, which still hurts, and it does not exist anymore. Or we should build something powerful like Ukrainian Singapore, which gives hope, which gives aspiration to come back, not only for the residents of Mariupol, but also for the Ukrainians from other places who would want to come back to Ukrainian Mariupol for this huge scale reconstruction. We created this platform, Mariupol Reborn, and we have big players coming to us, and we want to appreciate their support. USAID already hired 4 architectural bureaus which create the general vision of Mariupol, how we see the future of Mariupol, what will be the reason for us to come back to Ukrainian Mariupol, how we find forces inside of us which lets us carry on. And this work is important. With the support of our partners, we started this work back in September. We already created a brochure, the reconstruction of Mariupol, step by step, prompt actions, what we have to do within the 3 months, 6 months, within a year, 18 months after we return to Mariupol, what we should do with power supply, water supply, in other sectors. We already have concepts about 12 sectors to work on. We already understand the sum, the amount of money we need. It's 14 billion hryvnias. We already prepared. We prepare our partners. We prepare the central government so that they help us in this prompt reconstruction, rapid reconstruction. And another area of cooperation with our international partners, international financial organizations, IFC, EBRD, they are joined to document all the losses inflicted by Russian Federation to Mariupol, so that we already have this general vision of how much does it cost to reborn Mariupol. And we already have this approximate calculation. It's 14.5 billion euro. We want it to be documented with certain instruments, and they provide us with some mechanism how all these confiscated assets of Russian Federation are being transformed into reparations for reconstruction of Mariupol. So we create programs. We already write the draft agreements, the loan agreements. So this is how we create the vision of future Mariupol, and it will be united into one single joint mechanism, Mariupol Reborn. So you mentioned the architects who already work on the future vision for reconstruction of Mariupol. Do we understand it correct that after After they are ready, you will present their concepts to us. Yes, absolutely, it will be happening quite shortly. We're discussing the concept which would fill the architectural vision with the heart of Mariupol through the residents of Mariupol in these centers of support. Me, Mariupol, we hold an extensive discussion about the future of Mariupol, and based on that, the architects will represent their vision of future Mariupol, and we will unite that vision. We engaged one powerful player, architectural company Gensler, who builds huge buildings around the world, big airports, for example, which were constructed by that very company. We already signed a memorandum, we already signed an agreement, we start this work already, so they will create the master plan for future Mariupol. They will unite all those developments, all those concepts developed by those architectural bureaus. That will be an architectural vision that we will see here and in other cities, and believe me, we will talk a lot about that. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Do we have any questions remaining? Well, now that we don't have any more questions on the floor, I want to thank you, and I want to ask my last question about the law that was adopted recently in the second reading. And in general, the law on compensation of losses to Ukrainians for their destroyed property. We know that we had Miss Olena Shulak here in the studio. She was telling us that it allows the residents of Mariupol and other settlements to get this kind of compensation. What's your perception of this law, and how, to what extent it will help the people who are currently outside Mariupol and there, which is not yet deoccupied, how they can get this compensation? Thank you for this good question. First of all, I want to thank Mr. President of Ukraine for his initiative. Without his initiative, there would be no such law. I want to remind you that Volodymyr Zelensky proposed that law back in the end of April last year. It was a difficult work. It was there was a first reading of this law, and we haven't seen Mariupol during the first reading in that law. And I want to appreciate all the work of Ms. Olena Shulak, that she made amendments to that law, so we've already seen Mariupol in the second reading. Why? Because that law was related only to the occupied territories, so, but we propose to add the non-deoccupied territories for compensation. We understand what happened in Mariupol. 57,000 families remained without their homes. It's about 200,000 people. 47,000 families were registered on DIA application. It's about 150,000 people. And it gives hope to the residents of Mariupol, to the Ukrainians, that what happened will be reimbursed. As President of Ukraine proposed, how it will be compensated, to whom, how this mechanism will work. There are still mechanisms being worked on that would fill this law, and I think it will start working in April, so we're preparing to make it happen. We will create the committees, the local committees, before the second reading. That committee should be created in the liberated Mariupol, but now it will be created in the where the local council is, and the local council is in Zaporizhia now, the local council in Mariupol. And another detail which was added to this law was how to identify that, okay, we're not in Mariupol now. How do we know that this or that building does not exist anymore? But we understand that there is a lot of evidence, that there are satellite pictures that show us that those buildings do not exist, those apartment blocks do not exist. And if we come there on spot and we document it, over there, that will be the same. So this is why we proposed for the Cabinet of Ministers to create some conditions how we can do it, and they will be added. They were added to the law. How it will be counted, how many square meters would be compensated meter per meter, what will be the cost of the square meter. We proposed that there is a resolution per the resolution of the cost, which regards the cost per region. It's about 40,000 hryvnias per square meter, and in average, if we multiply the square meters per hryvnias, we will come to a figure of $50,000 average cost per apartment. That will be the average compensation per apartment. So how much money do we have to spend for only for the residents of Mariupol? It's $3.5 billion. That's an immense amount of money, and we have to understand it. We have to work that to make sure that Russia, as the aggressor state, pays for all the crimes that they created in Mariupol. This law creates the fundamental for reparations and compensation on part of Russian Federation. Thank you very much for this broadcast, dear colleagues. I'm reminded you joining us was Vadym Boichenko, the mayor of Mariupol, and our next briefing is at 1300. Joining us online will be Yuri Ignat, the spokesperson of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Trust in our armed forces and work together for our victory. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.